We can remember when even just a year or two ago, any mention of real ongoing criminal wrongdoing and corruption within the Western intelligence or investigative agencies, such as the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, or MI6 in England, was met with slanderous denials. The same response resulted if any of these agencies included wrongdoing by elements within the military or defense contractors, or in big finance, or the mainstream media. If non-government organizations, or incredibly well-funded foundations, or international organizations were implicated, the voice of response was always the same. Slander against the expose, even more so, calling out the power matrix and naming it as, quote, the deep state, resulted in conspiracy theorist branding and ridicule. But not anymore. Those days are frankly over. Everyone who knows even a small amount of what's really going on, and what has been going on for decades and decades, knows that there is in fact a deep state, and that fact is now readily admitted and accepted on primetime TV. The real issue facing all of us is frankly, why wouldn't there be a deep state? That's the real question that should be asked and should have been asked a long time ago. That should have been asked by many, many more reasonable people than we're asking. Unless you're in a state of permanent denial, of course, there is a deep state. Its development was inevitable within the rapid changes in technology, information dissemination, demographic change, and the enormous reordering of governments and their most essential agencies during and since the devastation of World War II, and even well before that. If you commission and empower agencies as unaccountable, covert companies mandated to perpetrate otherwise illegal activities and gross wrongdoing, meaning crimes, over a very long period of time, and all done ostensibly in the name of, quote, whatever good reasons for whatever political ideology, and if the substance of these activities are completely antithetical and even repulsive to the ideals and laws of a free and open society, well, isn't it inevitable that the result cannot help in the end but to be unfortunate? And this is what has happened. We can predict that as this gets more overt coverage, the response will be more censorship and even violent pushback by the authorities, both legitimate and illegitimate authorities. Censorship is a funny thing, though. The more censorship, the more the truth has a way of coming out in the most inconvenient and surprising ways. We predict that too, and you can check us later if we prove wrong. The major points of disagreement moving forward for an increasing percentage of the population, and for those who provide information such as journalists, commentators, politicians, academics, and insiders who come clean, i.e. whistleblowers, it will not be whether or not the deep state exists. No, the questions and disagreements will be the degree of extent of power that such a confederation has developed, and how united or conversely how intracompetitive the deep state is. How benign or vicious are its intentions? And lastly, what is the scope of the damage that it has already done, is doing, and will do in the future? Given the societal cognitive dissonance, which is the existential condition of the United States at this time, and because of the deep state and other negative forces aligned with it, formally or informally, and the overwhelming power and propaganda of the power matrix supporting it, the result is an unfolding crisis or agenda that we are observing or experiencing right now. It had become clear to us as early as 2011, and with many others too, that the information that we were investigating at both academic level and journalistic, quote, source level, quote, quality, was essentially and unfortunately accurate. Out of this, we slowly came to the unhappy conclusion that the options for a positive response on the part of a private citizen, any private citizen, to make a positive difference was extremely limited. Even if a citizen was wealthy, well-connected, and well-informed, responses were still extraordinarily limited. America and other Western nations, at least in some of the most important ways, were not at all what we thought they were previously, and they had not been what we thought they were essentially for the entirety of our lives. The local postmaster and the county commissioner and the neighborhood pediatrician were certainly normally good people. We might not have any real complaints about the integrity of most of our local politicians or bureaucrats. We weren't questioning the normal integrity of the regional business community in whatever area, or the local convenience store down the street, or the shoe store, or the electrical distributor, or the ball bearing factory. The local energy sector didn't appear to us to be the summa bonum of evil or the home of the moral felons and culprits that were made out to be by so many voices. But conversely, let's be honest. You don't need to control the kind of institutions or organizations or people in them that I've just mentioned at a local level in order to control something really large, like a nation state or a regional cooperation between a number of nation states. For that kind of control, you just need to control a very few important things. And if we don't think that kind of control is possible by a very few people and a very small number of organizations, then history, the long arm of history, would oppose us forcefully with the facts. So we were confronted with the facts, that the country that we had been born into had been captured, so to speak. It had been internally captured, progressively. No, not at every level. No, not at the local level typically. Not even at the state or necessarily regional level. Certainly not in every business and not in every courtroom or legal practice. We weren't saying any of that or seeing it. In fact, almost none of these had been captured overtly. None of that kind of capturing was necessary, though. But the country had been captured at the highest levels, in those very specific areas that really matter. And because of this, things were not as we had been taught to believe that they were in actuality. It was an enormous fraud. We were living in a very different reality than we thought we were. Well, what to do? We all recognize that there is no perfect place in this world, of course, especially Christians recognize that, and no place of social innocence or absolute transparency. It is only a choice of better or worse in different places given different times in history. And we all recognize that everyone's circumstances and situations are different, and therefore would necessitate a variety of responses to this truth. For us, this elicits charity towards other people, sympathy towards them. Opinions about what is and what should be done or what could be done may differ greatly. You can listen to Tucker Carlson or Glenn Greenwald for their ideas. They share some opinions, but they differ greatly on other proposed solutions when they do offer them. This is reality. Some people are well-informed, some are uninformed, and many others are misinformed, and no one is perfectly informed. It's a matter of more or less or better or worse. Here we see through a glass that is frequently dark. We await perfection, including the perfection of information and vision, but we only get that in heaven. But notwithstanding these limitations that constrain us for perfect clarity, it seems imprudent to us to willingly do nothing at all if you're an American or a British or a European subject or citizen or of some other Western nation. The culture at this particular junction is increasingly dysfunctional and disturbed and increasingly dangerous at the very highest levels, and of which we had almost zero ability to affect in any significant difference for a positive direction. But the areas that we do have control over at some level is the ability to be informed as much as possible, and also to inform others. We do have that ability, and we also have some control of making personal changes, even if we may not make any meaningful societal change at the present time. Personal changes can have a very large impact ultimately. The vast majority of the people, even very well-educated people, and very good people, and very well-intentioned people, are frequently deluded as to what is happening, and in fact what has already happened. The delusion that they experience was partly the result of the complexity of the very best information and the outrageousness and therefore unbelievability of the crimes committed. Combined with a plethora of misinformation and disinformation, coupled to this is the limited time or ability and motivation that most people have regarding researching information and ferreting out facts from fiction on the most important issues of their day. Most of us, all of us, have to rely on the research of others, which to no one's real surprise now has been badly compromised, or corrupted, or purchased for decades in all of the places that should have been courageously speaking out, in the media, in academia, and in politics. Not that there weren't any voices, there were, but there weren't enough, and they didn't go far enough. Apart from the impediments related to research, however, there is and was a much more significant impediment. And that impediment is the real emotional cost and psychological disruption of coming to terms with highly inconvenient truths that challenge long-held and long-cherished core paradigms. It is a question of the pain of undergoing an enormous paradigm shift, People understandably resist such emotional cost and psychological disruption because it is, apart from other negatives, very painful. Their intelligence, or lack of it, is not, in our opinion, the signet issue that keeps them from the truth. Resistance to paradigm-changing information is fundamentally an emotional and psychological challenge rather than an informational challenge per se. For those of us who have been trained to do authentic research, this is one of the times when information must be gathered and interpreted. Much of it is and will be removed by corrupt powers. Psychologically, many people have come to an unusual place where they do have the ability to make a difficult transition. It is now for them an actual possibility, a choice to believe or not to believe. For some, the emotional obstacles are still too high. They really have no choice, in our opinion. But others are able to shift out of long-held paradigms based upon facts and evidence that are essentially undeniable. At Church and State, we believe any reasonable person will view the evidence as undeniable. But even though facts may essentially be rationally undeniable, that is no guarantee that the best response will come forth. It is not easy. The social conditioning exercised by the power matrix and its organs of execution, including and most especially the deep state and the mainstream media, is certainly something to behold in yourself and others once you wake up out of the fog and look at it with objective eyes. We simply mean more objective eyes. You don't need perfect vision, though, to see a tornado or a freight train bearing down on you rapidly at a railroad crossing. You just need to know that it's there, and hopefully, if you can't throw the switch towards the other rail spur in time, then simply make some big noise and do get out of the way.